Welcome to Tuesday, October 28th, 2025, your Day Weather Podcast brought to you by the Advocates Injury Attorneys. If you've been injured in an accident, don't face it alone. Get an experienced local Wyoming attorney on your side. Free consultations at WyomingAdvocates.com or call 307-800-1952. You deserve an advocate. Well, we're waking up to some frost on the pumpkin this morning, and there'll be a lot of frost on the pumpkin tomorrow morning in many areas, as we're going to see a chilly weather pattern and a hard freeze tonight, probably more widespread in the region than we've seen lately. I think some of you have been able to escape in pockets the season-ending freeze, but that is going to get further south and more east tonight. Generally, nice weather. It's really going to be fairly quiet. Just don't expect it to be too warm. It's just going to be late October, early November, but we're going to go through the rest of the week into Halloween and into the weekend with some pretty decent weather. There'll be a bit of a backdoor cold front on Halloween, but we don't think it's going to be much of a factor. So the first few days of November, this weekend and into at least Monday and Tuesday of next week, looks pretty nice, really. Some nice ways to start November. But as we get towards the middle of the month, that's when things are looking more interesting. We'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about at the end for weather nerds, Weather Nerd Alert. We're going to talk about the quasi-biennial oscillation, or the QBO, and learn about why that could impact the winter forecast. Beautiful shot of the stormy, snowy weather there in the Wind River Mountains as that Pacific moisture came in over the weekend and really pushed through the region yesterday, bringing a wide variety of weather and travel problems. And all across the region, very interesting cloud formations came in with this Pacific moisture, driven along by very strong jet stream winds, as we've been talking about, and deep layered moisture getting forced off the Pacific right into the northern Rockies and northern plains. And you can see this very similar photos along the frontal boundary as it pushed its way through the region yesterday, triggering snow in the mountains, rain and snow showers on the plains, and we had thunderstorms in parts of Colorado yesterday. As you'll see here, Jan getting a shot of a thunderstorm that was near Greeley, Colorado, across Weld County yesterday. And one dedicated photographer, Jan is, not only was he capturing thunderstorms during the afternoon hours down south into Colorado, but he was back out chasing Comet Lemon again, the comet that keeps on giving, offering up really good opportunities to photograph that comet as it's taken its time moving through our skies here in the evenings and morning hours. Satellite photos this morning show the stretched out nature of that storm system. You know, we talked about how it was going to take a fork in the road and how the pattern was going to split, and that's kind of showing where that moisture and the cloudiness is. Now clearing is taking in behind this system, so we're going to have some sun. It's just chilly air behind it. Here's the next wave up into the Gulf of Alaska, looking pretty impressive on satellite imagery as it heads towards British Columbia, but it's likely going to minor out, meaning weaken as it comes off the Pacific, and we'll take a path like this as we get into Thursday and Friday, and that's going to lead us to the backdoor cold front coming in on Halloween. You can see the storm system digging in, hitting that big high, that big brick wall of the Imago pattern, and that's just causing the system to get stretched out like this across a lot of latitude. But it will cut in underneath, producing quite a bit of weather here in the form of rain and cool, wet weather for the southern plains here over the next couple of days. You can see Hurricane Melissa still dancing around very slowly around Jamaica. But all of this right here, this low pressure area here, will end up picking up Melissa and catapulting it very rapidly mid to late week, but it's still going to be a slow mover today. Here are the temperatures overnight into tomorrow morning. Now these are in Celsius. I wanted to show you, Celsius is easier to show because the gray shows where it's going to be 32 degrees or less. Notice some of the higher mountain valleys in Wyoming, the higher mountain valleys in Colorado here are going to have a really cold night. In fact, this morning it was 5 degrees at 4 a.m. at Lake Yellowstone. You're going to see some very cold temperatures. North Park, Colorado, you're headed to the single digits. South Park, Colorado as well. So it's going to be a really cold night. And you see a lot of 20s and 30s, but there's going to be quite a few teens in the low-lying areas. So by Thursday, that low that's out here comes up, over, and down, and gets injected into this storm system here as it moves into and gets consolidated into the Great Lakes region. Northwest winds aloft will keep temperatures cool. And on Friday, for Halloween, we see what we call a backdoor cold front. This low coming in, northwest winds aloft will push cooler air along and east of the divide. That may result in some upslope cloudiness Thursday into Friday on the backside of the system, but it's moisture starved. Nonetheless, come trick-or-treat time, this is 6 p.m. on Friday, and you can see it's going to be a little cool out here on the plains along the Front Range. Temperatures are a little bit below average, 3 to 6 degrees below average, so it's going to be cool for trick-or-treaters. Temperatures, though, come trick-or-treat time really don't look all that bad. It's just going to be, well, late October, heading towards early November. We've had far, far worse Halloweens in the region for sure. And this is the precipitation forecast. You can see a little bit forecast right here. This is basically because we'll get some upslope cloudiness Thursday into the early part of Friday along the divide here, but it shouldn't produce anything more than clouds. Otherwise, look at this. No precipitation at all on Halloween in that area there. This is why a big area of high pressure builds in behind it. So this is for Tuesday, November 4th. Notice a broad area of high pressure across the nation. Pacific air then floods the zone. So this is why this weekend into the start of next week looks pretty good weather-wise. We'll have to contend with what's going on up here towards the middle to the end of next week, as these will likely come through as frontal systems, as this high pressure ridge will likely be transitory, meaning it won't anchor. It will eventually break down, allowing the Pacific storm systems to come back in. But that won't be until the second half of next week or next weekend. So this weekend and early next week, a nice start to November. And you really can see this in the Pacific North American oscillation. If we go out for the next 2 weeks, when you see a strong positive PNA, you're going to have generally fair weather. So this is what's going to be happening here. This is towards the end of next week, takes it on a negative impact, and then notice the PNA goes strongly negative, and this is right around the 10th, 11th of November. As we get towards the middle of the month, the European model is showing good weather here, frontal systems, kind of seeing what's going on here, then we start to go negative, and the GFS model is showing the same thing. We've got that mountain, that good weather, and then start to go negative around the same time frame. So as we get after the 10th, 11th, 12th of November to the middle to the end of the month, we're seeing some long-range trends that are indicating a more persistent colder pattern, less in the way of these fluctuations, cold then warm, cold then warm. That's kind of how we're going to be for the next 7 to 10 days. But after that, it gets a little bit colder. Now we go into the nerdy stuff. We're going to talk about the quasi-biennial oscillation. Let's just call it the QBO. And here's the definition. I'm not going to read it to you, but this is where we have to understand that the tropics drive a lot of the mid-latitude weather, more than you could possibly imagine. What happens in the tropics really does drive global circulation patterns. Why? Because that's where the energy is. That's where the warmth, the moisture, the sunlight is more prominent down there. It's better to just put this all into just a description of energy. There's just more energy in the tropics. And what happens in the tropics eventually happens to other parts, other latitudes, especially mid-latitudes. What this oscillation is what the stratospheric winds, when we're talking 50, 55, 60,000 feet above, way above the troposphere, what these stratospheric winds will do in this alternating period of time where this oscillation takes place roughly every 28 months, or you can see there varies 24 to 34 months. There's two phases, a negative phase and a positive phase. Basically, a westerly QBO is when the stratospheric winds are generally more west to east near the equator. This is where we are right now. We were this last winter in a westerly QBO. What is forecasted to happen is that the stratospheric winds, as represented by this purple band here, the stratospheric winds high above the troposphere, 50, 60, 70, 80,000 feet, are coming from the east. Now you might say, well, how in the heck could that affect the weather in the mid-latitudes? We're talking about something in the tropics, and we're talking about something that's way up high in the atmosphere. Well, it can mean a lot because this causes differences in the global circulation pattern, and it also affects the polar vortex. A westerly phase causes the polar vortex to be strong and stable. An easterly phase, which is where we're going to transition to into the winter season to here, causes a weaker polar vortex. A strong polar vortex tends to lock up the Arctic and not allow the Arctic as many opportunities to pay visits south. This is where we are now. This is where we were last winter in a westerly QBO. Now that we're going to go to a easterly QBO, you get these opportunities where the Arctic air has more opportunities to push further south. Conversely, you also have more opportunities for low altitude air to go north. And when you get that, you tend to get stronger winter storms. So this is one part of the equation of the winter forecast, why the winter could really start getting going as we get more into November, December, and January, as you'd expect winter to be. But if you have a wavy polar vortex, a weaker polar vortex, you're going to have more north-south intrusions of cold air as opposed to this situation. So this is one difference from this winter to last. So the forecasted state is a strong easterly, or what we'd call the negative phase, during the northern hemisphere winter coming up right here. So this is where we are now. That's where we were last winter, but we're going to go to this. And that's going to lead to more opportunities of this instead of this. So that's why it matters. There's a lot going on. Don't have enough time to go into all the details, but the stratospheric winds over the equator go through these 24 to 28 month time periods where they go back and forth, and a lot of it's timing. So why does it matter? This is what we've seen in easterly QBOs before. Increased risk of sudden stratospheric warming events, basically polar outbreaks. So this is where you get the disruption. This is where you get the wavy pattern. This is where you get the big Arctic outbreaks. So in North America and in the northern hemisphere, notice you get we've seen enhanced rainfall and snowfall in the northern Rockies, Canada, Europe, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, the Midwest. This is a very wintry signal. It's a signal that says more winter this year, and you tend to have this wavy pattern, and it tends to have more favoring blocking patterns over typical La Nina years. And with La Nina fading, okay, the QBO will probably have much more of an impact than the fading La Nina than the La Nina overall. So it'll be interesting as we get deeper on. It's something that we're going to keep track of. Have yourself a good Tuesday.